I attempted suicide because I was dreadfully depressed, terribly depressed. I felt like I was falling off a cliff, and I kept falling and falling deeper and deeper. And I thought to myself, my God, I have to hit bottom soon. This can't get any worse. But I just kept falling. I kept falling. It was a bottomless pit.
I think suicide is an easy way for a person to end all his problems.
Suicide is a cop-out for people that are too insecure to handle life.
Suicide is a search for something better.
Suicide is the last straw of depression, you know, the answer for depression.
I think suicide is sort of a cry or a plea, the final last word that somebody has to make to tell that they're depressed and they have a problem.
It's the turning point. It's just you go one way or the other. You either end your life or make it better.
Hello, I'm John DeLazar for COPE. Suicide is the second largest killer of teenagers in this country. Only car accidents are responsible for more deaths. However, the number of suicide attempts is up to 40 times higher than actual suicides. In this program, we'll explore the subject of attempted suicide with the help of 3 young women who almost became part of the statistics.
And with the help of several young people who've lost a friend through suicide.
I think it's like a combination of things. Like school would make you go out and commit suicide, but okay, if you're having a hassle at home with your parents and you're having a fight with your best friend and then you're worried about getting an essay in time, and all these things combined are just too much pressure in your head, and you can't handle everything at once. So I think that would be like everything just combined to make you think about suicide.
Finding jobs, futures, like parents, hassles with parents, school, all kinds of things.
Especially when it comes to your future, you keep thinking, oh, what am I going to do?
Yeah.
What am I going to do? And you think, like, it starts off in high school, what courses am I going to take? What am I going to need? And it just gets all boggled up and you don't know what you're going to do.
Of course, adolescence is a very stressful time, and it's a time when the whole future is being mapped out, when a lot of significant decisions have to be made, and many kids don't have the kinds of supports that they really need in making those decisions. They don't have the kinds of people to whom maybe we turned or other generations have been able to turn. So they find themselves in a stressful situation and often feeling very alone in that situation.
Kim, do you ever discuss suicide with your parents or the attempted suicide of a friend?
Well, not with my parents. Well, I'm living with my father, and we don't really talk about it. Like, we wouldn't sit down and talk about it because to him it's not an open subject, like it's a closed subject, and I can't relate to him about it.
We talk about it with our friends, and, you know, there's a lot of other things that bother you inside, like with school, with your boyfriends or girlfriends or whatever. And when you go to talk to your parents about it, you find that they say they don't understand. They say, oh, you've got everything going for you. There's nothing to matter.
We talk about it, not a lot, but some of the time when somebody's down or depressed, that's one of the causes of suicide, I feel. It's because we're always depressed about school or something.
There's so much of a taboo around suicide, and very often a kid who has made a suicide attempt will find that no one wants to talk to them about this, and that it's something that they feel ashamed about, or they feel, I must be crazy to have done this. And so it's important to spend some time to get a perspective. What happened? Why it happened? The fact that it isn't crazy behavior, that it is in fact quite common. What it means about you as a person, that, you know, you're not worthless or crazy or anything else as there is, you know, just because of this. So that is a very important first step, talking it out, trying to understand. You try and involve the family or significant other people if they are part of the whole difficulty. Because obviously if it is a situation involving other people, there's no point in just working with the one and then sending them back to a situation that hasn't changed.
Jody is 19. She's attempted suicide several times. Yet apparently no one in her family was aware of these attempts until she volunteered to appear on this program.
Jody, from your point of view, can you tell us why you attempted suicide?
Well, I started trying to attempt suicide very young, and mostly I did it for attention. But the last time that I did it, it was more of a case of there was nothing left. There was no other way to get out of all the things I had gotten myself into than to either take a very far-away trip or kill myself. It was cheaper to kill myself.
But you've already said that you did it for attention.
In the beginning. I started at about 13.
Well, she became diabetic at 13. And she had an incident when she was coming home with another little girlfriend from another part of town. She was beaten up by a bunch of other girls around 13 who were of a different type. Leather jackets, and a bunch of them beat her up. Halloween it was. And she hadn't been out of the hospital that long with getting the diabetes under control. But from that time on, at that time she was beaten up at the age of 13, she started to put a shell, and we've all had trouble penetrating that shell since.
How many attempts have you made?
I lost count. Well, it's hard to say because a lot of them weren't really attempts. They were, but they weren't. It was kind of subconscious. Boy, they'll really be sorry now, so you can't really count them.
So I pushed the door open, and I saw Jody laying in a nightgown, face down. And I went over to her. I thought she was just sleeping. And I called her name, and I called her name louder, and I shook her. And as I shook her, her head turned to the side, and there was a little bit of blood coming from her nose. And I shook her. Then I got worried. I thought something must be wrong here. I shook her really hard, and she didn't respond. Then I realized that something was wrong. I thought she had gone into insulin shock because she's a diabetic.
But later on, you found out that it wasn't an accident.
No, I didn't know that until a week ago, when you people asked her to do this program. That was when I knew that it had been an attempted suicide.
What was the difference between...
Sue is now 23 years old. She attempted suicide when she was 17 years old.
The first time I was looking for help. I wanted someone to take me seriously. No one had been up until then, not really. The second time, I meant it. I did not want to live. I wanted to die, although I hadn't really thought about what it would be like to be dead or anything like that. There were a lot of similarities between the first attempt and the second attempt. They were both a result of depression. Both cases I took pills, different pills, both times, mind you. Both times I took the pills at school. Both attempts were totally spontaneous, or at least consciously spontaneous. I imagined my subconscious was working there. And in both cases, it was they were people from school, teachers, that took me to the hospital, got me some help.
Sue, would you tell us why you attempted suicide?
I was very, very depressed, severe depression. It was dreadful. I can't even describe it. I would wake up in the morning and think, God, no, I'm still here. I'm still alive. I couldn't figure out any reason for being alive. I hated myself. I couldn't talk to my friends. I couldn't talk to anyone. At first, I was eating too much. Then I stopped eating altogether, and I took the pills.
Laura is 19. She works as a buyer for a large corporation, and in her spare time counsels young people who survived a suicide attempt.
Basically, the reason I attempted suicide is things that happened in my life were so bad, I felt it was the only way out. And I was in such a state of depression, I didn't really realize that it was not just an ending of pain, but it was a long-term effect that was going to happen if I actually went through with it.
Was there any relationship between the first attempt and the second attempt?
Well, the first time I was 14, and I guess it was an attention getter. It was like a last plea for help. It was, I am so deep in depression, nobody's really noticing. Somebody's got to notice, and this is the only way they're going to notice, and that's why I did it. But the second time I really did want to die, I'd really come to the end of my ropes. And I didn't really know what to do. I felt that no one was really helping me.
While the rate of attempted suicide among teenagers is rising, health officials and police are often reluctant to report these incidents. They can't always be sure whether a person has attempted suicide or merely had an accident. However, it is clear that many teens unable to cope any longer with what they perceive to be an impossible situation attempt suicide. More girls than boys attempt suicide, but more boys complete their suicide attempt and die, primarily because boys use more lethal methods.
Dr. Diane Sire is the Canadian representative to the International Association for Suicide Prevention and works with young people.
Diane, are suicide feelings among teenagers very common?
Very common. As a matter of fact, I can't think of... No, I have on occasion met an adolescent who has said, no, I've never thought of it, I've never fantasized, I've never played with the idea of suicide, but certainly that's a very, very rare person. Most of us, at a difficult time in our lives, at least consider the possibility of suicide. It's a very common thing, yes.
There's a lot of different reasons to commit suicide. There are the people who are going to commit suicide because their boyfriend just left them and they can't face life, and that's really stupid. And there are the people who are going to commit suicide because life really is bad. And then I would tell them either to do it or to somehow fix it, if it can be fixed. But if life is really, really rotten, I really see no reason to stick around. I still don't.
When you tried to tell others how you felt, what was the response you got?
If I told my friends, it was hard for them. They were the same age as me. They were 16 or 17, and they didn't know how to deal with it. And also, when I got really depressed, very, very depressed, I wouldn't talk to anyone about anything. And so I wasn't telling people, not in a verbal way. I think I was telling them non-verbally that I was in trouble. I need help. The only person I would think that I really talked to and actually came out and said, I have to have some help. I'm suicidal. I'm in terrible trouble. Please get me some help, was my family doctor. And his response was, here's some Valium, and I have you on a waiting list for a psychiatrist. After I took the pills, and he came to see me in the hospital, and they, you know, I was lying there in this bed. He came and he said, oh, by the way, I've got you an appointment with a psychiatrist. I thought, oh, that's what it took. That's what it took. I had to overdose.
Most of us, at some time, have felt close to suicide, that we could do it, that if the situation got much worse, we might do it. And I think it's important to say, well, you know, you're not alone. You're not crazy and bizarre. I've gone through similar things. Or people who are experiencing the kinds of problems, the kinds of pressures that you've gone through, will think about suicide. It's a natural enough thing.
What was the reaction of your friends?
They wanted to stay completely away from me. They didn't want anything to do with me. They thought there was something wrong, but they didn't know how to cope with it, and I imagine their parents had heard about it. It's something like when somebody's pregnant, it gets around pretty quick. And they were just told to stay away from me, and people were told to be very careful about what they said to me. And I guess they were being careful because I felt like everyone was really standing off.
And what was your reaction to Sue's attempted suicide?
She scared me out of my tree. I was really, really upset. I had no idea that she was that depressed. She'd never really let on to me. And I was frightened.
Sue, do you remember what your parents' reaction was to your suicide attempt?
They were very, very upset. The worst part of coming to in the hospital was both times the first thing the doctor said was, your parents are coming in. I said, no, I don't want to see them. My mother was very, very upset. She felt as if I had hurt her. Why did you do this to me was the reaction. My dad was just upset, hurt. He didn't know what was going on. He had no idea I was upset. But my mother played quite a number with the guilt, trying to, I don't know if it was conscious or unconscious, but trying to make me feel guilty. Look at what you have done to me. It was really, really rough. That was the worst part.
I don't think anybody knew. It was like there was a wall around her. I could see her living her life apart from the rest of us, almost like behind a pane of glass, and I couldn't touch her, and it scared me.
I think at the time I was so self-contained and self-preoccupied that I didn't realize that anyone was trying to help me. I did, after a while, when things started to even out a bit, realize that these people were with me and they were behind me, and I was so grateful. I was so glad that they were being so supportive, but I didn't know how to get across to them what I was going through.
Many people who are depressed, who are significantly depressed, think of suicide or become suicidal. But it's not a one-to-one correlation. Not all suicidal people are depressed, and not all depressed people are suicidal. There are many other feelings that can enter into suicidal thoughts and actions. Probably the most significant would be anger. Many suicides are very angry, very upset. They want to affect other people. They want to have an impact. They're saying, in effect, I'll make you sorry. You'll be sorry when I'm dead. I'll hurt you. I'll teach you a lesson.
In my household, in my home, it was always enforced that you could not express anger. Don't even get upset. Don't even disagree with someone. You have to stay calm and cool and don't rock the boat. That was really unhealthy. You ended up with so much pent-up tension and so much, all this anger inside yourself, and the only way for it to go was to be turned inward. And anger turned inward is depression.
Do you think you resolved anything by your suicide attempt?
No, I thought, actually, when it first happened, after I woke up, I thought people would finally take me seriously. But they still don't. Nobody ever takes me seriously.
She says that no one takes her seriously. Is that the way
She
you
hopes they
perceive her?
don't. She hopes they don't. She makes a joke of everything, eh, Leo? She makes everything light. She would drown before she'd call for help, rather than make a scene.
Mm-hmm.
And yet, she chose the big scene. But then I guess she figured she wouldn't be there to see it.
When you were both younger, did you ever have suicidal thoughts?
No, certainly not.
Good God, no. Our mother would have killed us.
Why is that?
It was just not done. If our parents were able to live through the Depression and all the problems associated with it in World War II and not consider such things, then God forbid that we should try it or even consider it for a moment.
They really don't appreciate, when they're talking about dying, what death is. And so often the sense I get isn't that they want to die. You know, they don't really understand what dying is. What they're saying is, I don't want to go on like this. I don't want to live anymore like this. And the like this will relate to their sense of aloneness, to their sense of being caught in a situation, of being trapped, helplessness, hopelessness, not being worthwhile as a person.
I didn't understand the full concept of it. I was looking basically to relieve the pain and to get it over with. I didn't want to have to think about it anymore, and that was the only way of getting out of it because I wasn't into drugs or alcohol at the time.
You know, once you're gone, you're gone. And, you know, I think if you work at it, you can work out pretty well any problem. In time, it's going to be a hassle. You know, it's going to give you some anguish and, you know, be a problem. But I don't think when people commit suicide, I think it's they look at it as a temporary way. They don't realize the finality of it, like that once you're gone, it's all over.
Yeah, but I don't think that most people that attempt suicide want to die. I think they're just doing it for attention, you know, just to get out of their problems temporarily, just so people come around and, you know, help me, help me, not I want to die, but I want to get help. I want somebody to be around me.
What are some of the attitudes that the kids have who come to you for counseling after an attempt? Is it guilt? Is it shame? What are the attitudes that they have?
A lot, of course, depends on how other people have reacted. And sometimes the reactions are not what they expected. People will be angry. How could you do this to us? Or, well, will react in various ways. So, of course, that is part of what they have to come to terms with. Sometimes they're ashamed. They're ashamed because they didn't die. You know, I'm a failure at everything. I can't even kill myself.
Okay, my parents reacted the first time around when I was 14. My mother was kind of passive about it. She didn't really say much. She didn't judge me at all. My father just kept saying, "You're stupid. You know, why did you do that? You've got no reason to. You've got everything you want. You should be grateful." And the second time around, my mother took it a little more seriously, I guess, but not to the point where she actually believed I would go through with it. She thought I was an attention getter. And the second time around, my father didn't want anything to do with me. He thought I was, I don't know, some kind of a mental deranged person, I guess. He really didn't think too much of me, and I've never had any kind of a relationship with him since then.
The last time I thought of suicide was recently, and someone listened to me. And I ended up feeling really stupid and thinking I better kill myself because everybody's going to think I'm stupid. So I didn't find that didn't work at all. And I phoned my doctor, and I told her that she had better see me because that was it. I was pulling the plug. And she started yelling at me and telling me I was so stupid. And I thought, she's right. I really do sound really stupid.
Well, it's all in the past now, so I can live with it pretty well, but I can't understand anybody young and pretty wanting to commit suicide with their whole life ahead of them. I can't put myself in her shoes. I don't understand it.
Leo, how did you feel once you kind of got Jody straightened out in the hospital about her attempt?
Being selfish, I suppose, I was upset that she had actually done it knowing that I was the one who was going to find her body. And like I say, we were pretty close. And I couldn't understand how she'd do that to me, but those were kind of selfish reasons. Obviously, the kid was sick to make an attempt like that.
There are many mistaken notions about suicide attempts that result from the taboo surrounding discussion. For example, it's not necessarily true that a person who talks about suicide won't attempt it. Also false is the idea that once you've attempted suicide, you are bound to repeat the attempt until you succeed. And finally, there's the mistaken perception by most of us that the teen years are the best years of our lives. That's mostly true only in retrospect.
I find people, as they get older, tend to think being adolescent is absolutely wonderful. And they tell you things like, you think you've got problems? You haven't even lived yet. And I think it's the toughest time to go through. I think anybody who gets through it should be given a medal. And I wanted to say so. So that people would stop telling me I hadn't lived yet.
What are some of the warning signs when a teenager is contemplating suicide?
Well, there are verbal ones and there are behavioral ones. Often, kids will talk about not suicide so much as actual dying. If something were to happen to me, or they will say such things as, if anything happened to me, who would take care of my dog? So there's communication about death, or they will write about death. There will be poetry about dying. Their behavior very often changes. Sometimes they get very careless, very reckless. If they're at an age where they're driving a car, for example, they will sometimes have accidents, or they seem to be constantly on the verge of totaling their car, this sort of thing.
Can you remember what some of the things were you were doing to communicate to your parents or to your friends that you were feeling this way?
A sudden loss of attention in something that you've really loved, say it music, if you were very good in school, anything like that. A loss of personal grooming if you were very articulate with that before. Basic depression, staying alone if you were in a crowd a lot, coming home alone, your school grades take a sudden drop, things like that. Teenagers leave all kinds of symptoms around, and parents don't notice them, or they don't want to notice them. And they're very, very obvious, and they're always in a pattern, and they usually prolong over a certain period of time before anyone will actually attempt or go through with it.
When you know that it's getting pretty bizarre, or you feel it's out of control, or the sense of pressure and tension builds, as it often does, to the point where a person will say, I know I'm going to lose control. I know something's going to happen. And when it gets to that point, then you really should seek some professional help.
So what was your experience with the medical fraternity?
Specifically with my first psychiatrist. I'm sure he's a very good psychiatrist. He has an excellent reputation. I'm sure he's very good for some people, but he and I did not work out together. I went back to my GP and said, get me someone else. I don't think this person is right for me. He got me a different psychiatrist, a man who specialized in adolescent psychiatry, and it was great. He helped me a lot.
Are there certain things that we shouldn't say when someone asks for help about their suicide attempt or about suicidal feelings?
Cliches, pat answers, sounding like Ann Landers, I guess. For example, the first is to say, I know just how you feel. And of course, you don't know just how that person feels. You're not that person, you haven't gone through it, and they look at you and say, don't buy it. Another very common response, I guess, is, you're crazy to do something like that. You're just a stupid kid. And that, you know, terrific. That helps a lot to hear that. Or, probably even more common is, why would you want to do something like that when you have everything to live for, when this is the best time in your life? You know, your problems aren't really important or aren't really serious problems. Wait until you're my age, then you'll have problems. Simply devaluing the whole thing.
I can remember one or two people saying something along the lines of, why did you do this? Why would you do this? Like, they couldn't comprehend it. And all I would say was, you don't understand. You've never been through this, you can't understand. But for the most part, my friends were very good, very supportive, but they didn't know what to do.
I didn't know what to say. I just said, you know, things are pretty bad. And, you know, they said, well, things are pretty bad with me too, but I didn't do that. They don't understand that you can put yourself in such a state of depression that you can't come out of it unless someone helps you. My second attempt, I had friends around me who tried to understand, and my church people were trying to understand as well. And I had a psychologist then who was different, in a different town. And he was very, very good. He was very general, and he would tell me exactly what was on his mind. And he didn't just continually ask me questions and put me down for doing it. He really tried to understand, and he basically got me to read a lot of material on suicide and understand why I attempted suicide and how I could bring myself out of depression when I got in those moods.
When you say that when you're thinking of attempting suicide, something happens to prevent it, what kinds of things happen that prevent it?
All sorts of great things, but I don't want to tell you. But really, really nice things tend to happen to me.
And yet it isn't that someone comes and listens to you or talks to you.
No. But it usually involves someone. A few times I had things like, I was feeling really depressed, I won a stereo. Started feeling really depressed again and won something else. And people have come into my life that way. Just little things that are great.
Well, right now, to help myself, I have one thing going for me that I didn't have then. Back when I was a teenager, when I was having all these problems, I had absolutely no sense of self-esteem. I didn't like myself. I didn't have that to fall back on. Now, basically, I know deep down my core feeling about myself is that, hey, I'm all right. I may not be perfect, and I may not always have the answers, but I'm okay. So that when things get too frantic and that, I get depressed, I get upset, I talk to my friends, I go for long walks. And as a matter of fact, if things get bad enough, I'll see a psychiatrist, or I'll see my GP. I'm seeing a psychiatrist right now.
Usually when you start feeling suicidal, it seems like everything is at a dead loss and that nothing is going to resolve this problem. But you basically have to be able to think about it, be able to maybe talk to someone else about it and resolve the problem. And there's no problem in the world that can't be resolved as long as you trust yourself enough to give yourself some time to work it out.
Come. No. Take the ball. Come on. Come on. That's a girl. Good girl. Here, you want that? Go get it.